Hi, my name is Brett, and this is my review of A Wizard of Earthsea, a fantasy novel by Ursula K. Le Guin. If you haven't heard of Earthsea or Ursula K. Le Guin, then a really quick primer. Ursula K. Le Guin is an author of a variety of fantasy and science fiction novels. She has published dozens of books, I want to say, at least a dozen books, and tons of short stories. She's a really prolific author, writing works more appropriate for young adults, works that are not young adult, works that are fantasy, more typical fantasy in the world of kind of Lord of the Rings type fantasy, but also sci-fi and just regular novels and literature. So she's this incredible author. And A Wizard of Earthsea is the first book in a series of books that take place in, as the name implies, this region called Earthsea. So really quick, to start this off, I want to tell a little story about when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I would say I despised reading. I think I had only read, really back in my childhood, the only book I had read was, I remember reading Aragon. I would read it on my walk home from school. I lived about 2 miles from school, my middle school, and I would read the book, the hardcover book, while I was walking home, which I don't think I could read and walk now, but for some reason that was what I did in high school. Or that's what I did in middle school. And I just never really got into reading. I thought it was pretty boring. And I don't know why, it just wasn't part of my life then. And in high school, I had an English class, I think freshman year, where I was tasked to, well, every student was tasked to, but we got to pick an author to write a book report on the themes of the book. And I read through the options, and A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin was actually one of the options. So I picked that book, and I didn't read a single page of it and wrote the report. So I'm not proud of this at all, and I feel ashamed about it, but I wrote the report by just doing research online and reading about what other people had to say about the themes and reinterpret it through my own voice, which I think that's plagiarism, so I'm not super thrilled about that. But it's important because it ties in nicely to why I think this book is so meaningful to me. So by going and actually reading it 10 years later, while I'm in my mid-20s versus when I was in my mid-teens, it feels like I'm giving the book the justice it deserved, which is strange because there's not many books that I have a relationship with that I kind of faked or cheated on and then went back and read again. So to me, this book has a little special place in my heart where I feel like I was giving it the time it deserved. So as the name implies, and as I said, it's about this fantasy novel set in the world of Earthsea. It follows the main character named Ged. Ged starts off as a young boy and grows into a young man by the end of the novel. So it's all about his journey, and it follows him as a single character. He is, I think the biggest theme is his growth and maturity, and he's a just character and a kind character, but he makes a mistake, and the whole novel is about him trying to fix his mistake. And it follows Ged on his journey from, he lives on this island where he grew up, to becoming a wizard, to then trying to fix his mistake. And throughout this whole book, he's traveling to all the different islands in this world of Earthsea. So he deals with a dragon, he goes to a castle with a king and a person from his past, and he visits his old master and mentor, and he's learning and growing, and he's facing all these challenges, but he never resorts to violence. So a huge part of this novel is that when you look at the fantasy of today and even of the past 100 years or so, right, there's a lot of war. When you think about Lord of the Rings, there's the orcs and Sauron and all the combat that goes in Lord of the Rings. Game of Thrones, another really prolific fantasy series, A Song of Ice and Fire, so much combat and war and fighting. And Earthsea has, I don't think, any physical combat like that. There's some combat and action scenes, but there's not huge wars going on, and Ged rarely solves an issue by fighting or killing someone, which is huge because it's less about who's the strongest physical person, and it's more about problem solving and learning and growing, which I think are way more important themes than who's the most physically strong person. And tied to this theme is that the magic isn't just something that random people have or that just is part of the world. Like, it's not just present and anyone can access it. It requires studying and knowledge and education, and the core of it is knowing the true name of something. And once you know the true name of something, it gives you power over it, whether it's a person, an animal, the ocean and the water, to the weather. It feels really personal, and it feels like with everything you need to learn about it in order to have power over it with the magic, but also in order to use it, you have to usually give something up, right? You can't just go and use infinite magic and everything's okay. There's usually some kind of price to pay or some kind of reason that it, like, let's just say, for example, there's a wizard in the series and they're using their magic to build a boat. Well, that boat isn't just forever imbued with that magic. It requires energy and time and effort from the wizard to keep that magic going, which I think is really nice. It adds another layer to magic, which is pretty core to the book, which I think it handles really well. The writing, specifically, I think is really, really good writing. It's a little verbose for my personal taste, but I think everything has a nice flow to it. It is enjoyable to read. I'd find myself going back and rereading sentences and passages that were really impactful or I felt had more meaning on a second or third read, which I love books like that. I'm not super crazy about just page turners and running through it. I like to really chew on the words and think about it and let my mind wander and drift as I'm reading it and rereading it. And Earthsea, Wizard of Earthsea is really good for that. There's a specific quote in the book that I really enjoy, and it's just so simple, but to me it's so profound. Ged, the character, is on these islands fulfilling his post as a wizard, and he's on the island of Low Turning. And one of the islemen says to him, talking about the people of Low Turning, "We are none of us rich, though none starve." And that, to me, I just love that thought of everyone here looks after each other. No one is going and trying to. It's just, to me, it feels like it's the antithesis of capitalism, which is something I struggle with thinking about. And that sentence, right, "We are none of us rich, though none starve," sounds very like socialism, and I tend to lean more towards that world, and I really like thinking about it. I like how it was applied to this book. I'd say that if you're interested in fantasy novels, read A Wizard of Earthsea. It's totally worth reading. It's just a good journey, and it's an enjoyable journey to go on. The writing is layered, and there's more to it than just what's on the surface, and there's a lot to think about, and some really nice themes. As for me, I want to continue to read the books in the Earthsea series. I think the next one is called The Tunes of Atuan, which I'm going to read, but I'm actually taking a break, and I'm reading another book by Ursula Guin now called The Left Hand of Darkness, which is a science fiction novel about an emissary on a foreign planet called Winter. And so far that's been good, but that's for another video. And I'm also reading another book by Ursula Guin called Steering the Craft, which is about writing. And she's just so smart and incredible. So it's a real joy to learn and read and just engross myself in her works. And that's one of my favorite parts about reading, is when authors have many books to read. It's so enjoyable to go and read through them all, and it's almost as if you feel like you're getting to know that author and become more familiar with how they think about things and approach things, and then sometimes they go and defy your expectations of them, and it's such a wonderful experience, because when books are created by a sole creator, right, or when things are created by a sole person, so much of them are infused in it, and it feels so personal reading this thing that they wrote, and that's one of the things I love most about books is that personal connection and relationship. And I did a similar thing with Haruki Murakami, where I read most of his books all in a row over the course of a couple of years, because I'm not the fastest reader. And that was such a joy and such a pleasure. And yeah, I say Wizard of Earthsea, definitely worth the read. And I think it's a classic for a reason. And if you do get the edition I got is just the mass paperback. It's up on my bookshelf. And at the end, there's an afterword that Ursula K. Le Guin wrote over 40 years after it was published, which to me, that's incredible. Imagine making something and then thinking where you're going to be in 40 years and then reflecting on it. I mean, that's almost double my lifespan. And so I can't even look back, right? The most I can look back is maybe 10, 15 years. And to think that times 2 or 3 times, that's just so awesome. That's the kind of thing where, as I write and put things out into the world, I would love to be able to think about and revisit these things decades in the future. And Ursula K. Le Guin in that afterward just has so many wonderful and inspiring things to say about the book, about how it's kind of its impact and its role in the world and where she was when she wrote it and how it is now and how she was thinking about it. So if for anything, I think it's almost worth the read just to get to the afterword and hear what she has to say. Thank you.